All right, here we go. Another true Brew Bobcast here at the end of Détente Road at Cafe Détente. I have a wonderful guest. He's been around since, I don't know where he even popped up from, but when the cafe was finishing up, all of a sudden Ken Romero comes in, and he's been a fan of the cafe, and I've been wanting to get him on, and we can talk about 100 things with this guy. But I thought, Ken, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
First off, how's the coffee?
The coffee is excellent. I came for the coffee. The interview is secondary, so we're doing fine here. We're doing
See
fine.
Where I stand.
Yeah. And I'll try to withhold some sarcasm today.
Please don't.
It's difficult.
Please don't. Well, I guess since I met Ken, one of the things that has been a big part of my life growing up is the radio, and just that whole industry, and then thinking back how it just was such a big part of Americana. So can we start talking about that first?
Sure. We can start there. We can end there. Any way you want.
So a couple rapid fire questions. So you were in the radio media, of course, your professional voice. Bring everybody up to date on how your industry part in that industry.
How far back do you want me to go?
Let's go from the beginning. We got a minute. Let's go.
I'll talk real fast. A lot of people ask me, how did you decide to do radio? I think one day I was at home sick because I couldn't go to school, and I'm listening to the radio, and I'm like, these guys get paid to play music that I listen to, and they sit around all day and drink coffee, and I'm like, sign me up. And of course, going through high school, going through college, that sort of changed, and it's like, what are you going to do when you get out of high school? Then what are you going to do when you get out of college? And lo and behold, in college, I needed one more credit. So what did I take? Communications, KRVS, and it was at the beginning. Trust me, it had just gone on the air like the year before. So we were 10 watts at the time. Your lights in here have got a lot more power. Mm-hmm. And it was very structured and very 1940-ish, 1950-ish. After about half a semester, I'm like, I'm going to go out and get a job, man. I don't need this. And so I did. And never went back to UL. Well, I did go back, but didn't go back to broadcasting. And after that, I went to work at originally KXKW in Lafayette.
So you went straight out of college into radio.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was KXKW at the time, 1520 AM. They were the first station around here to play country music. It was totally strange because they were kind of at a loss. They went rock and roll, and they blew KVOL off the map in the ratings, but they just could not sell the fact that they had the ratings, I guess. So anyway, they went country, just, for the heck of it. And so I went to work there and playing, Hank Williams Sr., Ernest Tubbs, people like that. Conway Twitty was the new guy. To let you know how far back that was.
So is this late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah, 1966, 67. And needless to say, what happens? I bought a car. The next day they laid me off. That always happens.
Yeah.
So I went to New Iberia and got an interview with Don Bonat, Kane. Don Bonat is legendary. Mm-hmm. He gave me a job, and I worked for him for like about a year. Decided to go to an electronics school in New Orleans. Did that. And when I came back, he didn't have an opening for me. So I went into the Army at that time because what happened is Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the Army recruiter says, would you like to go into our radio? And I said, no, I've heard you guys.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's a great idea, but it's the 1940s and 50s. So I went into an electronics school, and I worked with voice crypto. And because of that, I spent a year right outside of New York City. So I listened to some of the best radio ever for a year. And then I went to Stuttgart, Germany. I went to Paris, France for 6 months, worked at the American Embassy as a civilian-looking employee. We had no uniforms, no haircuts, and we lived. There were no bases. So
But you still enlisted.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
You're still in the.
Oh, yeah, it was great. So I worked there for 6 months. Then I went back to Stuttgart for a few months, then came back to Lafayette and worked little jobs here and there. KSMB.
So you think your talent kind of kept you from taking another potentially worse route in Vietnam? Like, did they recognize your radio skills and put you?
No. Because I said, no, I don't want to do radio. It was like, what else have you got? And
Okay.
I asked them, okay, I'm in for 3 years. What's the MOS, military operational specialty, that I can get into with the least chance of going to Nam?
Mm-hmm.
And it's got the longest school. Sign right here, buddy. The school was 40 weeks. And by the time I actually went in with delayed enlistment, the school was a year. So I spent a year right outside New York City. I mean, I could go anytime I wanted. It was a 40-minute bus ride, and it was terrific. It
Nice.
really was. And the electronics school was actually fixing things, the communications equipment. And the equipment, being we're way out of that time zone, I can say it was equipment that was highly used in the Vietnam conflict because we had these sources in various parts of the world that were top secret. And by the time I got out of the Army school, I already had a top secret clearance. And by the time I got out of the military, I had so many clearances, I had no idea what they were. But I worked in a couple of buildings where you were allowed to go in, but not look at either way, go to that door on the right, and you could go in and do something. And on the way back, you were escorted out by an MP. So it was stressful, you know, but it was interesting. And I learned a lot of electronics. All the electronics that we have in this phone, we had a room as big as this building to do this. And it was all encrypted. And, you know, when you tapped into it, if you were tapping in, you'd hear shh, just white noise. And we thought that was great. And then a few years after I got out, I realized, and I did a Google search, the Russians had cracked that code by the time I got in. And we thought this was better than sliced bread. And it was, the Russians were just laughing their butts off. You know, at the embassy, it was really weird to see Henry Kissinger walk through the lobby, and I'm like, this is secure stuff, man. And with his accent, it didn't matter one way or the other, you know. And there were some names, you know, like Henry Cabot Lodge, a bunch of people that, you know, you might remember if you were older than dirt. But yeah, it was all secure communications.
Okay, so what year did you get out of the military?
I got out in mid-70.
Okay, so it wasn't over quite yet.
No, Vietnam wasn't over for sure. But then I went to work a couple of smaller radio stations here and there. I went back to KNE in New Iberia. And it was interesting because events jumped around all over, and I wound up moving up in management. And the opportunity came up to buy the station. So I was included in the buy with some other people who actually had money. You know, I was the guy that had the technical expertise and stuff. And so
what station was this, Ken?
KANE.
And that's based out of where?
In New Iberia. AM 1240. Wow. You know.
AM.
Yeah, AM. It was
so let's sort of let's throw an anchor at about where you're at right now and kind of go back a little bit. So what was your range? What was the antenna? How far out were you?
Oh, you mean the signal?
Yeah, signal. Okay.
Basically from Morgan City to Lafayette on a good day. You know, on a good day. But I worked at other stations that were interesting, if I can go back a little bit. Right now, there's a station called KROF, AM 960. You can barely hear them outside of Abbeville. The tower is right outside of Abbeville. But at the time, because of how the groundwork was laid for the antenna, you could hear that station, depending on the engineer. We had a great engineer. You could hear us from almost Bourbon Street into Beaumont. And when I got out of the Army in 1970...
Man, that's a couple 100 miles.
We were number one in like 9 parishes. an AM station. That's before FM really got going. But I'm on the air one day, and this couple comes in with some kids, and they said, we'd like to go talk to Ken. We just drove in from Beaumont listening to him. And I'm like, ooh, this is cool. But we had an engineer, Bill Tipton, who was, talk about the mad scientist. This guy could take a computer and, well, there were no computers then, but he could take the transmitter and hop that sucker up legally. And just, it was really great working with Bill. And then I went to work at KSMB, which was at the time the only FM around, and nobody listened to it, nobody at all.
Really?
Yeah. And after that, that's when I went back to KNE in New Iberia.
Yeah, well, KSMB when I was in high school is what we listened to in Franklin.
Sure.
That was what was WFMF then?
In Baton Rouge, 102.1, I think, something like that.
KSMB was, I think that's when Novosat just started way back then.
Yeah, I refused to hire Novosat. He came apply for a job.
Did you really?
Yeah. And it's a shame. Bobby, if you watch this, I'm sorry, but I didn't hire him because I couldn't handle his ego. And that's
that hadn't deflated.
That's before he made it big too.
Yeah,
so I spotted that character trait right away. And Bobby, look, got to admit, the man has done very well for himself. He's done a great job in the Lafayette market. Really great.
Yeah. Well, you just coming out of your teens, and he was hitting it pretty good back then. But to go back a little bit, just because. Let's just talk radio in general. So I think I looked up last night. The first time the word disc jockey was used was like in the 30s. And then, I think of like the Wolfman Jack and Paul Harvey's and all these people that did the radios. And so what was, in your opinion, when I think of the heyday of radio, I think of the late 50s and 60s and the disc jockeys that were just touching into that baby boomer rebellious crowd. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I agree. And you mentioned the name disc jockey. Maybe in the 30s somewhere. But especially when Alan Freed came along. Alan Freed in New York City, and it just, I think it took off from there, and.
What were they using the word disc jockey and DJ back then, or what radio host?
Some people were, disc jockey and DJ and stuff like that. I don't know about radio host. That was more like the old NBC, the news. The guy's doing like this, Speaking of Gary Owens, that's a different story. But I think it got to be used a lot in the 60s for sure.
Now back then, from the old movies and in my brain is that these artists that was just trying to get out there, how much control did the DJs have over the music being played, and how much did the station control that with a playlist? I mean, it seemed like the DJs had a lot of power to break somebody out if they beefed their record up.
That happened before I got in.
Okay.
That happened maybe in the late 40s, early 50s, or the 50s and early 60s. But by then, there were congressional hearings and stuff like that, the payola days, plugola days and stuff. I don't know of any particular jocks or artists that were doing that, let's say, in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. I know a couple of people that were, there are ways to manipulate the plays shown on a playlist. Mm-hmm. And some people I know were doing that and they got caught and got fired, things like that. But as far as for now, disc jockey has got no control. When you call the station and say, "Oh, can you play my request?"
Oh, it's coming.
Yeah, it's hold the phone, and it's like, "Can you play a song that used to be my dad's favorite in the 1960s?" Sure. And it's not to be rude or anything like that, but the jocks, like you said, there's a playlist, and it started with people like, I can't even think of some of the people, but Bill Drake was one of the people that started Top 40 radio. And it was like he's sitting at a bar and a couple of other people, and they're sitting there and realizing people are playing the same songs over and over and over on the jukebox. And on radio, they were just playing everything possible, trying to get everybody's attention. And it dawned on them, if we just play a certain bunch of songs people like, and that's why we got a playlist that in some stations it was a top 20, And if you think you were sick of the songs, we were.
I'll bet.
Yeah. But there's the jocks have no control. They can move things around maybe, but there's no such thing as hey, I'll pay you $5 to play our song more.
So
where
where did the value or the popularity come from the disc jockeys? Like if you were witty, like you clearly have a wonderful voice and pleasant and all those kind of things, but that sells so much. I imagine you have to have a little content with you, what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, you have to have some content, and I mentioned sarcasm, and it's something I've come to realize. It was great in radio, but when you walk out, you leave it at the door because it's amazing how hurtful sarcasm is. It's funny, but it's also funny because you're making people laugh at something or somebody, and it's tough, it really is. But yeah, being sarcastic, being funny, being able to do voices and things like that. There's some jocks that do all kinds of voices. I can't do any voices. I'm just me. That's it. And as far as everything else, a sense of timing, paying attention to what's going on in the world around you, to where you can say, "Hey, did you guys see the Beatles last night on the Ed Sullivan Show?" Back in that time,
But back then, you couldn't really have that much of an opinion, correct?
That is correct.
I mean, and we'll get to that soon, but all that changed.
Yeah.
And so what, who was telling you what you can and can't do? I mean, do you get called in and say, "All right, man, you got to tell me one of those stories or something"?
Oh, yeah.
There had to be some bear traps, right?
Yeah. All right. Talking about music, this was, early 67, maybe late 66. I'm on the radio at Acadiana in New Iberia, and we had an owner, George Thomas, and I will try not to say anything bad about the dearly departed, but George grew up in the Depression, and he was tight with his money, and he knew he was the boss. So I'm playing a song on the radio, and the phone rings 10 o'clock at night. And it's Mr. Thomas. He says, "This is George Thomas." And I'm like, what do I do now, And he says, "That record you're playing right now, take it off and go put it on the manager's desk. As soon as it's over, I'll do that." "No, I want you to do it now. It's a 7-minute record." He says, "I don't care. Go put it on his desk." Okay. Took it off. Nothing on the air, dead air. I walked to the boss's office, put it on his desk, walked back, put another song on. And he had a way of doing that with songs he did not like or artists he did not like. And I won't go into that. It would just take too long. But yeah, that was a thing, And the song, glad you asked, "Light My Fire" by the Doors.
Really?
Listen, in that era, late 66, early 67, a song that's telling a girl to light my fire, we couldn't get much higher for ears like his that grew up in the Bible Belt.
Killing him.
Oh, my God. I'm surprised he didn't drive from Lafayette to New Iberia to come take it off. Yeah.
The Doors. You were spinning the Doors while they were hot. Bro.
Oh, man. And then I got to see them the next year, of all places, in Asbury Park, New Jersey. It was interesting. And when Morrison came out, I thought, "Mr. Thomas, you watching?"
And so 69 comes about, and that was a big year for the country. And we had a lot of rebellion going on and all that. What was happening with radio when that was going on? Conservatives were still in control of the mic, right?
Yeah. And this was, I'm telling you the story about the Doors. late 66, early 67, everybody was going to Haight-Ashbury and San Francisco. And matter of fact, my program director had just come back from San Francisco. And that's where he came back with the Doors record. So to say that there was a battle going on between the conservatives who wanted to make money with radio and the newer guys that said, yeah, but we can bring more people if you will let us do this. And they were like, well.
And this is rock and roll?
Oh, yeah, there was definitely rock and roll.
And so you had a new audience that started to make a little money. And so
yeah,
you had to play what they wanted. And back then it was all about the ads to pay the bills, right?
Yep.
And so, do you remember some of the products and all? I mean, did it go from the, the regular, buy this type of orange juice for the married couples to something more, for the younger crowd?
It took a long time for that. It really did. And if you notice now, if you're listening to radio, and I won't even get into television, but if you notice, there are more and more commercials for car dealerships, lawyers, no commercials for local grocery stores, local bars, because they can't afford it. Because the prices have been going up and up to buy the ads because the stations are owned by corporations. The last station I worked at was one of 315 stations. So they've got some debt load they've got to pay off. So the commercial prices keep going up. The smaller people get left out. So when I was in radio in the 60s and 70s, there were commercials for TGNY,
I remember that.
Bell's Department Store, National Food Store, IGA stores, Browns, the bar down the street, all these things. And there were a few car dealerships, of course. There were no doctors or lawyers. But now the guys with the big bucks can buy the commercials, and all the smaller businesses can't afford it, or they're going out of business. I mean, you get a Walmart come into town and you start seeing the smaller businesses go. And it's the same with radio. And a lot of times you hear what's called PI, per inquiry. If you'd like to find out more about this product, call 1-800 blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well, that last 4 digits are the identifier for the station. So if Bob Luke calls, they will get whatever percentage it is. And there's some stations now, it's all PI because they can't sell anything locally.
So where'd y'all get y'all local ratings from? Like, when did that come out, and who measured that?
I will tell you the first ones that I remember, and they were Hooper ratings. I have no idea what the heck, how they were done and stuff, but I'm pretty sure it was probably, they call 5 people, and that's what they said. I listened to this station. Then it went into at least Arbitron ratings, and we lived by Arbitron. Oh, my God.
But was that a call-up in sort of a...
It was at first, I think, but then it moved into, we're going to call you and say, would you participate in this, and are you employed by a radio station? If you said yes and no, you are not related or whatever, they'd send you a little booklet, and you would write down the times you listened. Now, that's kind of ineffective because, it's 7:15, I switched to this, But there were places that would happen, and I know some people that got the books, and they say, I listened to your station, and they just draw an arrow all the way through it, and we got credit for that.
Y'all were clever, man. Y'all would do the call in, and I'll give a hint, and then everybody was just hanging on listening, and then you give something away like 2 hours later. Y'all were bait and switching the heck out of everybody.
I did a contest that to win you had to be listening at 3:30 in the morning on a Thursday.
Brutal, man. Y'all thought of those, or who did that?
Oh yeah, I thought of it, but I got it. There are no original ideas in radio or in art. Forget that.
It's all plagiarized.
Yeah, it's plagiarized or modified. And there were some guys in California, of course, who were just masters of manipulating Arbitron and other things. And it was like they'd go into a neighborhood like a zip code and say, we're coming back to your street or your zip code Monday, and if you're listening to the radio, our radio, you stand a chance to win this. So they'd go to a bunch of different zip codes, And it was like people would just tune in, and then they got wise to that. I used a phrase that upset the manager of another radio station, and I won't mention names, but I cut a promo that said, remember, if anyone should ask, you're listening to KANE. Guy went crazy, called me up and said, you can't tell them to do that. I said, why not? He says, because you're influencing the Arbitron. I said, I didn't say anything about Arbitron. All I said was, if they should ask. And then later on, I found I could go further and say, write this down. You are listening to, that upset everybody. But there are ways to manipulate it, and now it's tougher and tougher to do it. And so much of it is all automated now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, you can tell who's listening to what station with a computer. So you don't need input.
Nothing, right.
Yeah. So, but...
Okay. So, yeah, I just think of those old cars with that AM, FM radio.
AM radio. Then it became AM, FM.
And you had like five deals, and you got 5 stations. And I remember my mom going, and she would rotate around, and if somebody quit playing a song, she was hitting buttons until she found another song.
Yeah.
But that was wonderful. This, I guess, would that be a part of Americana? I mean, I guess I'm sure Great Britain and a few other ones did the same stuff.
It was different in Europe because it was all run by the government. Oh my God, disc jockeys have to wear coats and ties, kinds of stuff like that. And we were growing long hair and stuff. It was totally strange. And then Radio Caroline and a couple of other pirate stations came about, and that just freaked the BBC out because these guys were out in international waters, and it's still interesting, the pirate radio station.
Oh yeah. So how far behind was Lafayette from, say, California or New York, and far as for progressive with their music and what we were saying on the radio or whatnot?
I would say we were behind, but not that far behind. Sometimes you would hear a song in Los Angeles or San Francisco, and you wouldn't even get it from the distributors for another month or 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. Or it would take that long to hit here, And it was, it was just, sometimes it was instant. Like when you played The Doors, the first time you played that record, bam, that was it. But other groups, it would take a while before, and basically that's what it is, migrating from the East and West Coast, coming in, And it was definitely a...
I just think of the different genres and even types of music. Like from when I was started listening to music, it was sort of coming off of that late 60s rock and roll, and then the 70s came in, and you was always mixing in country and western, but disco comes about, and then big hair bands, and then you had pop music, and then so what is the radio stations, how they navigate through the new music coming in?
Because of things like Arbitron and lots of research, people realized you cannot do what they did in the 40s, where it was like 2 hours of country, 2 hours of big band.
You had to pick a lane.
You had to pick a lane, absolutely. That's why KSMB plays what they play. That's why KPEL does talk, because that's what they want to do.
But they're pretty safe, top 40 safe, huh? I mean, they're not going to try to...
And see, I can't speak to that because I'm not on the air anymore. And I was never on the air when KSMB was, getting rock and roll. So I can't speak to that. But like now, if you wanted to put a new radio station on, if you wanted to put a true Brew Bobcast radio station on, decide what you want to do. Now, there's some people that do it. K-Ball is an example. When they went on the air playing Cajun music and throwing in some country music, all the, the network guys, the guys that own all the stations, well, that's not going to work. And it did.
Yeah.
And it did, because there's a market for it. They're doing it well. Now, can somebody else come on and say, you want to do the same thing here? You could do it, but you would have to do something either different music-wise.
Are you a copycat?
Or, well, even if you're a copycat, you can still do it. But you could also hire their number one disc jockey.
Yeah.
Or you could also find a disc jockey somewhere else who, would want to come and be your True Brew Bobcast production director or program director, something like that. But I mean, there's so many people that are starting their own radio stations. You can look on Facebook. Start your own internet station in 3 days. Anybody can start a radio station on the internet. But it's like, you're not going to make any money at doing that unless you are freaking great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we all wanted to be the Wolfman. Wolfman was crazy.
Well, yeah.
But you aren't old enough to hear him when he was on XEG.
No, I wasn't.
Well,
We caught the residual of it in movies and
yeah,
things
you
like
caught
that.
yeah. But before that, he was on XEG, XERF, and maybe one other one south of the border. And he could play or do anything he wanted. And, when you got this guy's voice, he was from New York, and his name was Bob Smith. Hope I didn't blow anybody's mind with that. But one night I'm listening, and he says, I'll send you a Jesus Christ t-shirt autographed. You can't do that, dude. He could. He made
Back then, that was a big deal. Right?
Yeah, he could do that sort of stuff. You couldn't do that now, but he owned the airwaves, man. I mean, talk about a blowtorch. Mm-hmm. It was incredible. Yeah.
Okay, let's get back on Ken's timeline. So now you're in the mid '60s and '70s, and what's going on in the radio world in Acadiana?
That was the time when AM was still ruling the airwaves until the '70s, and then FMs were coming in. And I'm gonna rewind real quick. What's interesting is KSMB was really coming into being, and it was originally, the license was granted to the guy I mentioned, George Thomas. When he owned KANE AM, he bought the license for FM and never did anything with it.
And remind everybody the difference between AM and FM.
Ooh.
Like, wasn't FM like a more powerful frequency?
Well, it's AM is amplitude modulation. So like right now we're talking. And if you look at this on an oscilloscope, you'll see a band. I got to talk with my hands to the camera. But you'll see like a band of green stuff with nothing if we're not talking. But as you talk, it goes up and down. So it's amplitude modulation. Whereas with FM, it's frequency modulation. So with the lower tones, the higher tones, the signal moves this way, not up and down. AM has the potential to reach out further.
Got it.
Because FM is kind of hindered when it hits buildings or hills. In San Francisco, the FM stations couldn't get a signal anywhere. The AM stations ruled. But
if you caught an FM, the music sounded great.
It sounded better because there was no static.
Oh, that was a big deal.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And AM radio, you would have static from, lightning and car noises and stuff like that, But FM was crystal clear when you got it.
Okay, I'm not picking on you right
now. Go right ahead.
Okay, so radio just ran into one hurdle after another. I would have to imagine the 8-track tape, realistic 8-track tape, when you got to put it in vehicles, they started listening a little bit more of that than radio, right? And then cassettes, and then CDs, and then all the other things.
I have never owned an 8-track. A player or an actual 8-track. I just never saw.
Were you protesting?
No, I just never had the need for it. I mean, I had all the records I wanted, first off. But I did have cassettes because there were some things I could put on cassette and listen to whatever. And I don't know how much it affected radio listenership. I know some people that have never listened to radio I know some kids that have never listened to radio, but I know some people that in the, let's say, the 80s did not know what the AM button was for. They had no idea. So, yeah, it started becoming FM was cool, compared to AM. That's what my parents listened to. And so many times I'll run across somebody and say, oh, yeah, I used to listen to you all the time when my mom brought me to school in the morning, and hey, I'm fine with that. It paid the bills,
Yeah.
I don't care, but...
So the radio didn't see a huge bump when the 8-tracks and cassettes came through.
I don't think so. Because again, you have to understand who's going to fill out those little Arbitron diaries. It's not going to be the 18-year-old kids who are listening to cassette CDs or 8-tracks. It might have been their parents. Well, I got off from work, so I have to have a beer and supper. I'm going to fill that little book out,
Well, I remember you just couldn't afford it. We couldn't anyway. I mean, you'd get an 8-track tape, and it was awesome, and you listen to it about 20 rounds, and then you can listen to the radio again and just pop it in.
Yep.
Every now and then on the weekend, and the same way with a cassette. And then when you got tired of them, they were on the floorboard or whatever. But okay, so bring us into talk radio and opinion radio, and I think in performance radio. I mean, we can pick on Bobby Novosad a little bit because that's who I remember when I was young, and he would have all these little skits and things, and I don't know if he got real opinionated. I think the first real opinionated show I listened to was like a Walton and Johnson. Back in the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, where were you in that groove?
I was not. First off, I worked at KE for 27 years, so I was there, but I was also on the air and I was also in management, and I didn't have time to be doing all the skits and stuff that Bobby did and stuff. And I'll rattle your cage with another one. Do you remember Scott Seagraves?
Wow, I hadn't heard that. No.
Well, I talked to Scott last week, and when Scoot came to town, man, that was great because it was big time radio. And, a lot of people said, where does this guy come from? Well, he came from Memphis. He came from San Diego. He came from, and now he's living in BFE, Arkansas, where he came from. But it was a big change. But anyway, I forgot your question.
No, we was just talking about like people started to get into a little bit of the entertainment side, and sort of music didn't come second, but they wanted to hear two people talking, and they wanted to hear a little bit opinion, a little bit news, but with a flair. And so that wasn't part of y'all business model?
To be honest, before I left KENE, I was doing some interviews. It's like on Wednesday mornings, I would talk to the mayor of New Iberia. On Thursdays, the parish police juror. Friday, the school board members, things like that. But, for like 5-10 minutes at a time. And that was fine. But then Rush Limbaugh came along.
Oh, yes. That was a big one.
Let me tell you what. When Rush hit the airwaves, it was an earthquake. It really was. Because this guy was talking and, weird opinions, man. He was trashing politicians and stuff. And this is from a guy who never graduated college and got fired from his first 5 radio jobs. So he did pretty well for himself.
Yeah.
But when Rush came along and started doing opinion, and there's a difference between the interview thing, where on KPEL, when I was working there, my last job, it was interviews. I mean, people would come in and we'd talk like we're doing now. And then in the afternoon, I started doing a show with Dr. John Sutherland, and it was an hour of just us talking, rambling, doing what the heck we wanted for the hour. So we could, pick on the mayor or pick on the governor or whoever. And somebody said, where do you get your material from? Look around, man. It's all here, And there we could discuss, or we could argue with one another, or we could pick on somebody like Rush did. I mean, when Rush was on Hillary Clinton for so many years, I thought, man, if she dies, his whole show's toast.
Right.
But he found other things to talk about.
Howard Stern.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, here's this lightning rod comes through, and that's late 80s.
Yeah.
Early 90s. He was, and you know, I asked myself what made it so popular. But if you really think about it, if you don't have a group of people to discuss these very topics with, because most people were minding their own business and those kind of things, this was inviting somebody to come in and sit down and talk about topics that you might not have had an opinion on at the time.
Yeah.
But it was bold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But not only that, as an adult, you could listen to conversations instead of the disc jockeys that were being stupid on the radio.
Or programmed by the
playing the
station.
same 20 songs over and over.
Yeah.
You know, and
it was fresh.
Yeah, it was fresh. And to be honest, first time I heard Stern, I thought, what a jerk. And
I felt the same way. I'm like, why is everybody? My wife was listening to him when she was in school, and I'm like, man. And it was tough for me to listen to.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got into it. He I thought he was a little juvenile.
Yeah.
To say the least. But I dug into his humor a little bit and started getting it.
Yeah.
Still don't love him. I like him more now. I don't listen to him regular.
Yeah.
But it was changing how people listened, right?
Yeah. Did you see his movie, whatever, and maybe it was Howard Stern, the movie?
Oh, yeah, that was a while back.
When he gets his first job and the guy says, no, you have to say like WNBC. Right. And he, it's like, dude, and we all went through that stuff, man. So no, you got to say it like this. No, don't do it like this, but yeah, we could all identify.
Well, who taught you your craft?
Probably working.
There's no DJ school, right?
There used to be.
Really?
I don't know if there are any DJ schools now, because talking about passe, when I'd get a person come apply for a job and they'd say, I went to this disc jockey school, I'd just file it.
Yeah.
Because you went to a school that was being taught by people that couldn't do it.
Yeah, and right.
Yeah.
You want somebody authentic and you know untrained almost.
I don't know if you know Kenny Hazelett, or you've heard Kenny.
I remember Kenny Hazelett.
Kenny Hazelett was one of the few people that I know that went to a broadcast school and came out and was just smoking on the radio. He went to DJ school, learned everything he could, and applied all of it. Most of us will go to schools or seminars, and we might catch a little bit. Kenny went and got it all, And sometimes I'd go to seminars or conventions, and I could not bring all that information home. I'm going to get fired if I do this. I'm going to get fired if I say that, So, but yeah, I mean, I worked with some great people that, I picked up good habits from. I picked up some bad habits from. But I worked with some people and associated with some people like Skip Broussard, who got KRVS on the air. He was the guy that the movie Good Morning Vietnam was fashioned after.
Really?
Because he was in Korea doing exactly what was said in that movie. So, and Skip is still living in Dallas. But I also worked with a friend of his, Roger Cavanis, who was just great radio guy. And also learned a lot of production techniques from Joe Martin, who was one of the crispest voices on the radio. I worked with some other people that went on to bigger and better things, but I learned a lot from those people in particular.
Yeah.
You were much too young to remember when KXKW was doing country, and they had a top of the hour ID, and it had the music from what the heck was it? Magnificent Seven. And there was a voice that says, go from Lafayette to Biloxi, and KXKC is there. And the music was all that, and it was just balls to the wall. Great stuff. Skip Broussard recorded that maybe in a day for almost every town between Lafayette and Biloxi and Beaumont. It was magnificent. That's the kind of work this guy did, and it was interesting.
Hey, jetting in my mind right now, what was the big radio station in Shreveport where Elvis and all those guys got their start? There was a big
Well,
show.
they went to the Louisiana Hayride.
Hayride.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And would you believe I met his guitarist a few years back? They were playing a show in Shreveport, and the guitarist didn't show up or something.
Well, how did the Louisiana Hayride get so big? They had a lot of people because that sort of connected to Memphis and maybe Sun Records.
Yeah, yeah.
It all tied in, right?
Yeah, but you have to understand, at the time, there were no FM stations cluttering up the airwave, and there were a lot less AM stations. There were also a lot less interfering things like electric signals and stuff. So Kiel and Shreveport at 50,000 watts at night, they just boomed in here. Just like WWL in New Orleans, I would listen to them in New Jersey at night. But you can't do that anymore. There's just too much stuff. So Kiel, just when they went on, all of South Louisiana could listen to Elvis, and Shreveport is not that far from Memphis, which is not that far from Nashville. It's a little triangle almost, And like I said, I met his guitar player because the guitar player didn't show up in Shreveport. And I said, well, find somebody who plays guitar. So somebody went down the road and said, hey, we'll get James over here. So James came in and played guitar, and Elvis was like, oh, man, we're hiring this guy. And it was very interesting, very interesting.
Is there any just old school radio towers out there anymore? How does people broadcast?
Oh, yeah. Same towers are out there. Yeah. The KROF I mentioned, the tower is still on the Highway 162 going to Abbeville, but the building itself is on Bertrand Drive because you can do that sort of stuff now. And the Dog, 97.3, their tower's right here in Youngsville. And, all the other towers, wherever they were before, that's where they are, but they're also online everywhere. I mean, you pick up, whatever. But the towers are still there.
Okay, so that brings us into talk radio and just I guess I'm getting older, and I wouldn't know the last time I listened to regular radio.
Me neither.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't know when it went away. But I miss it. I think I miss those old disc jockeys and noises and things on the radio. It just sort of walked you along in life,
Well, the other day I was listening to Big 102, and on weekends they run Casey Kasem's American Top 40, and it's like, I'm listening to something and he'll say, that was the number one song, and I'm like, what? Oh, that was 15 years, 20 years ago, it was crazy, but...
Well, he made a big difference, Casey Kasem.
He did, and I learned a lot from reading about him and listening to him and a few others. As you can tell, I don't speak loudly. I don't project. There's equipment that does so much for you today. But Casey Kasem, when he was using, first off, a $4,000 microphone, he would talk at about this level right here. And he says, if you're recording something and they can hear you in the next room, you're not doing your job because you're talking to them, you're talking at them, as opposed to saying,
conversation.
Here comes your favorite song now.
Right.
That is much more personable. Speaking of personal, I have to do this part. When you hear people do, well, thank y'all for coming, or thank all of you for listening. How impersonal.
Right.
It's thank you for listening. I'm glad you joined me.
Yeah.
And again, I got that from some indoctrination in first off, listening to the guys in New York City, and then coming back and seeing sort of a short Bible from a station in Houston, KILT, K-I-L-T, that Bill Young was the program director, and we had this typewritten sheet on what to say on the air, how to say it, and here's how to record the commercials. And there was none of that yelling and screaming stuff. It's irritating.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But I don't have that kind of voice. I don't have a voice that projects. I've worked with some people that did. But, here's all I got, you know. And by the way, your coffee is excellent.
Good. Now, I dialed into your voice immediately. It's like I love it's. I don't want to. It's a narrator's voice. Like if you could read a book, and I can get into it. But great gift, man. Thank you, Mom and Dad, every now and then.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Ken, what about Paul Harvey? He came in too, and you talk about a storyteller.
Yeah.
Y'all would just sort of, now he could like sell his voice and his stories, and then the radio stations would buy it. How would that work?
I don't know how it started originally, but as an affiliate of, let's say, ABC, where he was the last time, I think, you would sign a contract to carry him, let's say, at 7:30 in the morning and at 12:15 or whatever, and you would carry that, but there would be commercials on it. That would be Paul Harvey's reading them, or there would be other commercials, and you had to check and sign a little thing every week saying we did carry that, so that's how it got paid for. But Paul was phenomenal.
The rest of the story.
Yeah, and some people think, but he was blah, blah, blah. He was that. First off, he didn't serve in the military, and there are rumors about how he got out of that. I don't care. He was a patriot as far as I'm concerned, and yeah, definitely. That. Now the rest of the story, that was the thing. So many people remember that, and can I rewind back to 1966?
Please do.
Somebody had told me that, listen to people that are better than you so that you can, pick what you can. And one day I realized I was watching The Tonight Show, and Ed McMahon was a master of pauses, just like him, Budweiser, the king of beers. He did it just like that all the time. And I started realizing that, I could pace certain things and get their attention that way. And that just made an incredible impression on me. But then you get to Paul Harvey, and when he would say the rest of the story, you know how he would do that? Or Good Day Americans at noon. He would say, Good Day Americans. He'd be walking out the door in that last sentence.
Just to get the distance?
Yeah, he was gone, man. That was it. He was done for the day. He'd been at work since 3 o'clock, Crazy.
Man, some people are just talented. I mean, just like, well, it's your trade, so you're gonna always look and analyze for the way people are saying and talking and moving, and most people don't. But so you have a professional voice. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, did you do a lot of commercials and voiceovers and things like that? Bring us into that world.
Man. When I worked at KXKW just before going in the Army, figure I was like 20 years old. I was on the air 16 hours a day, maybe. There were no other full-time announcers. I would walk in and they'd hand me a stack of papers that cut these commercials. I would record those commercials while somebody else was on the air. But I'm one of these people that when I was in school, people say, who wants to read? My hand went up because I was an avid reader from probably the age of 4 or 5. So I read a lot, and, I read. And when it got to radio, then it was, can you say all of these words and say it in 30 seconds? Things like that, and you learn how to pace yourself. But yeah, I've done commercials for everything under the sun, and I've narrated things. I've done voiceover work for Schlumberger, Hughes, Baker Hughes. I mean, I've done 60-page reports for them. Thank you, Christmas. They paid for a lot of that, yeah. And one of the best things I'm known for, God, I hate to say this in case somebody hears this, when you get arrested and you go to Lafayette Parish Correctional Institute, you will hear, welcome to the Lafayette. I kid you not, man. Put your socks here, do this, you can use the phone. I mean, I did that, and it was like, God, this is crazy. I've done a lot of helicopter training videos, like put the seatbelt in when you're drowning, don't do this, And I've had some guys come up and say, you did the training video for that helicopter commercial. Yep, that was me, So, yeah, done a lot of that.
The last name Romero, being a Cajun and getting able to work through all your accents and things like that and have that professional voice, that couldn't be, it had to be a little bit of, how long did it take you to do that?
I don't remember.
It just came. I mean, you were working.
Well, first off, when my parents worked, they both worked, so I stayed with my grandmother until I went to school. She only spoke French. My parents spoke French and English. Therefore, I had it coming and going, and my parents they'd switch from English to French mid-sentence, and they both spoke English well, so that was good. But I don't remember actually saying, I've got an accent I got to get rid of. I never, ever remember that. I had a couple of words that I could not say, and I realized it, and I worked my butt off. I could not say regularly. Like,
you had to slow down.
Regularly priced at. I went in the production room and rolled tape for hours doing regularly, and just a couple of other words like that I can't even remember. But yeah, worked. But I don't ever remember. And, people will say, I need a commercial. Can you do a Cajun voice doing this? No, I'm sorry. I can't. I don't want to do it, first off, because I think somebody who sounds like an American doing a Cajun voice is belittling. I really look down on that,
Yeah.
I really do. And it just might be me, I don't know.
No, I get it.
And, you're talking about the name Romero. The Romeros came from the Canary Islands in Spain. They settled in New Iberia. So people say, wait a minute, you got a Spanish name, but you speak French and you don't speak Spanish. That's because the Romeros came here and the French people just indoctrinated them.
Yeah.
So,
do you hang out with some French-speaking buddies?
Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, tomorrow at noon, I'll be on Zoom with one guy in France tomorrow, one lady in Toronto who's from Senegal, two people in Nova Scotia, one near Chicago, and a few from around here. The lady in Chicago comes down every year for a month or so because when she was growing up, her aunt lived in Grand Isle. Now, she is very northern. She speaks French. She speaks Cajun French, as some people say, and she speaks Spanish. She's taught them.
Nice.
I got a guy in Boston who was born in Quebec, speaks perfect English, speaks French, and he teaches Spanish as well. So, yeah, we do that every Tuesday. On Friday morning at 10, I have some of the same group, but one guy who's from Westlake, near Lake Charles, lives in Dublin, Ireland, and he wants to learn his French that he forgot as a child. So he's going to be on, and we do it at 10 in the morning because it's better for his time where he is. And he comes down maybe once every couple of months, and we have lunch together. And he's getting better.
Well, I've been interviewing a lot of Creole French speakers, and my grandmother was pure Cajun French. I don't speak French. I know probably, 40 words.
Yeah.
So how would you classify your French? Kitchen table, Cajun French? But if you're talking to people from France or whatever, did you refine your French?
I have to say yes. But being exposed to my grandmother and other people of her age or my parents, where we lived in Lafayette, our vocabulary was limited to certain agricultural things, whereas I've got friends who grew up down the bayou, and they're more fishing oriented. So they'll say some words, and what the heck is that? And the same with me. And when I lived in France, I was kind of concerned about my French because I thought it just wouldn't fit in. I never had anybody turn around and say, what the heck did you say?
Right.
Or something like that. Got along very well. And there were words that I had never heard before, but you could glean the meaning because of the context. A lot of it has to do with context. And there's certain words or certain sounds that are difficult, especially for Americans to make. And, part of it is the French R, the R sound, And there's certain words that are almost impossible for people to learn to pronounce if they didn't speak it as a child. Écureuil, squirrel. You try to get an American to say that, they'll hurt themselves trying to say it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult, but I grew up saying it,
Yeah.
And my vocabulary, I would say, is limited. I can't have a political discussion because I didn't hear those words as a child, but I read more French now. I listen to more French. There's so many resources. It's amazing. It's amazing stories that you can slow down, or you can watch the words come up, and if there's something you don't understand, you click on it, and the definition pops up.
Nice.
Things like that. So, yeah, my French has gotten better. And again, I go to events. We had some people come down from Nova Scotia. She's from Nova Scotia. He's from Paris. And when I interviewed him, I said, "So, Alain, why did you wind up in Canada?" He says, "There's a woman." It was like Jimmy Buffett, a woman to blame, And he's from Paris. He and I speak. I've taught him how to use microphones and audio equipment because he was starting a podcast.
Nice.
And I think I've told you the story. I was trying to help him with something, and I'd say, "Well, push that button." And he says, "I don't have that." And I'd say, "It's because I'm looking at my screen in English. He's looking at it in French." So I reverted mine to French.
Got it.
And it sure made it a lot easier, But I'm glad that I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrific. Thank my grandmother.
Yeah. So you started Ken's Random Podcast. So how's that going?
It's pretty random. Trust me. To be honest, I don't know how well it's going. I don't pay that much attention to the analytics of it because it's depressing, because it's slow to get started, just like anything else. It takes time, and doing a random podcast as you are doing. I mean, this is a random podcast. I've watched some of your stuff, and it's entertaining because you bring guests that they don't relate to the guest you had last week.
Right.
And that's what I do. It's random because it might just be, I saw this guy, Bob, today. We'll talk about that. Or I went and saw some cats, And so there's no niche that I'm focused on. And I think that has a lot to do with it. But lately I've been doing reels on Facebook. The other day, I just did a little 30-second clip, and at the end of the day, "Congratulations, 900 people have viewed your thing." And I'm like, wow, they must have nothing better to do.
Well, I think you're a bit of a behavioral scientist. I mean, I think you sort of pick up on human behavior and you get a chuckle out of it, and you say it in a way where we have to laugh at it ourselves, man. Why not? What else are we going to do?
Yeah.
But no, I like it. I hope you keep up with that. I didn't know what I was doing. I've never done anything like this at all. But what I was hoping to do or accomplish on my podcast is that I like to do very little or zero prep. Okay, because I think that the viewer sees what's raw. If somebody reviewed it, or if I wrote something down right here, I'm gonna go down my question, and it won't take a natural conversation route. And so that sort of, the bigger, to zoom a little bit further out, I think the reason for the cafe, you and I talked about it too, is I think we just need to get back to common discourse, communication, agree to disagree.
Absolutely.
And so does that concern you looking back? I mean, the way people are just hollering at each other on the radio and everything. I mean, where did we lose the ability to communicate,
I'm sure you had this in a history class somewhere, or you may have heard it. Don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. John F. Kennedy. Now we come to screaming back and forth, and Donald Trump, Kamala Harris. Where did all this screaming, name calling come from? How far back does it go? I don't remember that happening. I mean, I can't imagine Jimmy Carter making some of the comments. I can't remember any of the past presidents, and I don't know whether I want to blame Donald Trump or people that are opposed to him, or did it go back an election cycle before? I don't know. But it is upsetting because it covers the fact that some people may not have a plan whatsoever, but if you talk loud enough, you know.
But Ken, the kids are watching.
They are.
Man, they learning from this, and they think that this is the right way to solve problems. And it's so upsetting because, my kids are in their 20s now, and but this was happening for a minute now, and my grandmother had 13 kids, and we sat around a big table, and there was a lot of difference of opinions, but you know what? Everybody left there with a full stomach, hugging each other, and we was going to be back there the next Sunday. Yeah. And maybe it's just because I'm getting older. I just feel like that's slipping a little bit.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And I was always told never discuss religion and politics.
Yeah, that's me. Yep.
And in a way, my dad was right, but in another way, he was wrong, because we have to discuss those things. Because if you don't, you just go away ticked off at people, and that's why you get people shooting each other and stuff like that,
But no, it just seems like there's little tolerance for the other side. And I don't know if we were just, we started this whole conversation off about media and radio. And so, well, this will be a question for you. I think it was somewhere in the 90s. I'm going to jack this up, but all the big media companies started buying out. Now they're big. They're for profit. They have to get listeners, and they're going to sensationalize things, and they're going to get their host and their opinion people to just say the most outlandish things. And don't you think that that's sort of the fuel to this?
Yeah. It's like...
they're better off if everybody's divided and screaming at each other. Yeah, it makes them tune in, right?
Oh, yeah. Fox has got their listeners. They've got their haters. ABC's got their listeners and their haters. And if you don't have that, neither company's going to make a buck. It's like, say, lead with blood, if you can, If it bleeds, it leads, and things like that, And these days... it's true, man. It's true. It really is.
I know, but I think our soul is paying some price for that. Bro.
Oh, I agree. I agree with you, man. Our souls are, because, man, it's. You don't want me to get started on how far we can go in that discussion, but yeah.
But let's stick to the media's responsibility, because you come from that.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not blaming old school radio on that.
Let me check this out here. I'm sorry. Got you.
No problem.
Go.
But that's what people are tuning into, and that's sort of who they're mimicking. And then all of a sudden, I'm hearing a conversation in the cafe, two people talking, and all they doing is talking points from two stations on TV at each other.
Yeah.
And man, that's not even two people's authentic ideas.
Yeah. I'll give you a hint. I turned this TV on Sunday. I watched the Saints. First time the TV's been on since I don't know when.
I'm with you.
I don't watch. When I left the radio station, I said, I'm going to cut my blood pressure down about 20 points. I'm just never going to listen again. And I'll admit, I've got physical issues that cause my blood pressure to go up. But I also did not need this constant negativity, man. Oh, my God. Just, unbelievable stuff coming out of the media. You don't know who to believe anymore. You know, when Paul Harvey would say it, you think, I believe it. And then Rush Limbaugh.
Cronkite.
Yeah.
Cronkite.
Yeah.
When Cronkite said we're not going to win this war,
Yep.
what the president even said, well, Cronkite said it, it's over with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all of that going on, and you know, when Rush came along, it was like, well, Rush said it, therefore I believe it. But then, you start getting some division.
Yes,
because he was loud,
yes.
and the thing is, look, like I said, the man didn't graduate college, but he was one of the most intelligent people ever. And his dad was a Supreme Court justice in Missouri. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, and he's got a brother who's an author, but he brought intelligent.
I know, but he started flirting with conspiracies, and he did a lot of things.
Yeah.
That I don't know. I mean, you know, one thing about a free country, we rely on our own filter system.
Yeah.
You can't filter, but, you know, I guess what I'm hoping, this is what I'm hoping, is that our children and our grandchildren, their filters get refined, and then that they start to take everything with the grain of salt and start to, this is like one big growing pain. I'm hoping that. And I have more hope than most people.
Yeah.
I see this new generation, which my kids are a part of, and I feel like they're starting to understand it a little bit better. I'm hoping. I'm more hopeful.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to get involved.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah, you know, and it's truly sad because you got to watch what you say, where you say it. You know, you're in a restaurant, you can't say something about, God, this food sucks, because somebody next to you is liable to say, that's my brother that owns this place, and he's liable to shoot you or something like that. You know, it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Well, you know what? I'll switch it back to radio and we'll wind it down.
All right.
But I guess because it was part of my youth, and radio sort of got sucked into the days going by during my lifetime, and who knows, might have the resurgence of the old school DJ come back, man, like the vinyl records.
Never can tell, but I hate to tell you, that's
you're not betting on it.
Nah, that's blind faith, man. That's blind faith. But you never can tell. You know, it's like, what's going to happen when all the computers go dead because China's going to launch some nuclear thing? We're going to be writing in cursive, and none of these kids will know what the heck we're talking about.
They have to pull y'all out of retirement.
Yes.
Might happen.
Hey, yeah, I could do it. And I mentioned earlier Scott Seagraves. Seagraves and I used to laugh about if they would let us do a radio show together, he and I. Now, neither one of us do voices like Walton and Johnson. You know, half those people are not real. All right?
Oh, I know.
Yeah. But Seagraves and I could just do a blistering morning show, but it would have to be, somebody probably have to be holding the dump button, you know, the censor button.
Right.
But we could definitely do it. Now Scott's too old and says no, he won't even do a Zoom call with me. But yeah.
No, I remember all that stuff.
Yeah, Seagraves, what a trip, man.
Oh, yeah.
He's one of my favorite people.
You know, in Franklin, we had KQKI.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
And we had, Bob was from there. What's Bob's last name? Y'all were good friends. He owns a STM. You don't know? I'll think of it in a second. Anyway.
You're talking about Holbrook?
Holbrook.
Oh, yeah, Bob Holbrook, yeah.
Bob Holbrook,
yeah,
thank you.
He came to work for us, too, in New Iberia, and then he moved on to open the business he's got now.
He married the Franklin girl, but if I remember right, those guys were KQKI.
Yeah. He worked at, I think he worked there, and he was from Generetta originally, I think.
Okay.
But I'm not sure, but his family definitely knew Iberia, a lot of Holbrooks around.
We'll get him on the show one day.
He'd love to do it. He'd love to do it, I'm sure.
Oh, I bet.
And he's got a voice, man. I mean, it's mellow.
I know. Y'all got it. So how can people catch up with you on your podcast?
Ooh, glad you asked. It's KRP, Ken's Random Podcast. It's on YouTube, and if you go to Spotify and Apple Music and all the usual outlets, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I think I've got 49 episodes up now, and later this week I'll be doing episode 50.
Nice.
With my friend Dr. John Sutherland, who is
Nice.
John is an incredible person. Doctor is doctor of political science with a law degree, who does specialty work with conservation and environmental issues.
Nice.
And he's got 3 books he wrote. 3 books he wrote during COVID. What did most people do?
I know.
Stayed home. He wrote 3 books, and it's all about various pollution things.
Nice.
Yeah. So we've talked about the first 2, and this one we'll be talking about, I think, what are we talking about? Yeah, hogwash. It's about pollution caused by the pork industry. It's a great book.
Yeah, y'all dial into that. Ken's really good, and he puts out some quality stuff. How long? Tell him a little bit about how long do you try to keep your podcast?
That depends, on the topic, and it depends on the person. And I try to keep them shorter than 30 minutes. I found that the ones that get the most traction are between like 8 and 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. That's because people are listening in their cars.
Bite size.
Yeah, I'm finding a lot of people I know say, "Oh yeah, I listened because I was on the way to work and it's 8 minutes," something like that, But every once in a while I'll go longer. Every once in a while I'll go shorter. It's.
Yeah, I find that like I listen to there's a Wall Street Journal, and that one ranges around 11 to 16 minutes, and great little bite sizes. They do a good job. A lot of editing in there, but they have a lot of resources too at Wall Street Journal. I like the shorter ones because they get straight to a point and tell a story quick. I find that when I'm interviewing people, you really can't get to know them in too short of a time.
Yeah.
And so it's not for everybody, but a lot of people that listen to them now, they do it time and a half. And, they do it up and down the road, and they'll pick it up or whatever. But anyway, it's all good. Well, Ken, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, enjoyed it, man. Let's do it again.
Next time, we'll talk to the viewers about how to make some gourmet bread.
I can do that.
Good.
So during COVID, I started baking sourdough bread. We can talk about that. Yeah, very good.
Well, we're going to have you come by and do an event over here, and with the holiday seasons, why not, right?
We might do some blueberry lemon, or we might do some, I don't do pumpkin spice, just it's a principle of mine.
Right.
I don't do pumpkin spice, but blueberry lemon's good. Everything bagel seasoning.
Nice.
Cheese and peppers.
Nice.
Yeah, good stuff, man.
No, that's good stuff.
I'll put some weight on you.
Good. All right. Get the app, Cafe Détente LA. Follow us, and the Chronicles are going to get up and going. The Cafe Chronicles. Want to thank Ken Romero, a treasure for us here in the radio world. And
you got low standards, man. Low standards.
That's what I'll run with.
I understand.
All right, thanks. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.